Lou Pennisi is a grief educator and an illustrator. And after a 5-year period of cumulative losses, she found herself struggling in her grief. She felt that every time she came up for air, she was hit with another loss. Feeling isolated and alone after her mother passed, she decided to create an Instagram account where she would write her feelings about grief, loss, regret, and create an illustration to go with it. It was never meant to be anything more than somewhere to pour her heart out, but it became so much more. Through sharing her vulnerability, the page grew quickly, and she has something like over 120,000 viewers or likes and viewers on her account now. So she could see that she was helping others, and this in turn helped her healing process. Not long after that, she became a grief educator, studying under David Kessler. She still works as a illustrator, but she focuses right now on helping others in their grief. And her mission is to normalize the conversation about grief, educate society about the impacts of grief and trauma, and create safe spaces for grievers with no judgment and no timelines. I am so thrilled to be speaking with Lou because I followed her for quite a while and her posts helped me. And I want to have this great conversation so that we can all share in how we can move through grief. And Lou does this so brilliantly. So join me for our conversation. And of course, I'm going to be putting all of her information in the notes below so you can connect with her, follow her on Facebook. And if you're in Australia, she has workshops coming up. So enjoy the conversation. And of course, if you like all of this content or any of this content, please do subscribe and hit the little bell too that gives you a reminder. Thanks for watching.
Anyways, Lou, I am so happy to finally get to speak to you one-on-one and see your beautiful face and talk to you about the incredible initiative that you started, the Grief Project on Instagram, and everything to do with grief since it seems to have just blossomed into this wonderful career. So let's start by, first of all, telling me, how did you decide to start the Grief Project? What happened in your life?
Yeah, it was a strange period in my life. I had about 3 to 4 years where I had a lot of loss. I lost my mum initially, and then lost a very good family friend, my mother-in-law, our very old dog.
Mm.
It was just a period where I felt like every time I kind of came up for breath, another thing hit me. And then we went into COVID, and Melbourne was hit pretty hard with lockdowns, which I think Canada was too, I believe. Yeah. So
Worse than anybody else in the world.
well, we've been told Melbourne was worse. So yeah, we're on par there, definitely. It was, and then during that time, my marriage ended as well. So,
Mm.
um, I started the Grief Project about a year after my mum died. So initially, I was really struggling with that loss, and I just got to a point where I felt really isolated in my grief. I felt like there was something wrong with me because I wasn't moving on or moving forward. I got really stuck in it, and then I don't even know how it came to me, but one day I just decided to create this little project and create a space there for me to basically just let it all out. And I am an illustrator as well. So I just started piecing illustrations together that were based on grief, putting them together with my writing. And yeah, it just resonated with people and sort of took off. And really, in doing all of that, it helped my healing a lot because it suddenly was not just about me. It was actually helping other people and connected me to so many other people too. So yeah, it's been a really amazing journey in that way.
That's so wonderful. I know I've been on your Instagram many, many times. And your illustrations are so cute and lovely. And it's like really appropriate because when we're in grief, I find, you know, it's the little parts of us that are suffering. So your illustrations are so appropriate, and the words that you attach to them are also very appropriate. It really hits home, and it, in a way, it gives us permission to have those feelings, which I love. And of course, I was reading through some of the comments too. It really did start some amazing conversations.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's such a beautiful space. And I mean, there's a lot of people there now. And as it started to grow and get bigger, I was a little bit, I almost grieved that. It was like, I felt like I'd lost this little community, but it's so beautiful seeing people connect as well over their grief. I mean, every post I can kind of see little friendships forming and just people feeling less alone, even, I mean, we all have different types of loss as well. But particularly when I see parents who've lost children and them connecting with each other, it's just really beautiful because it can be such an isolating thing for many people. Yeah.
Yes, certainly. And just going back to how big that's grown, how many do you have now? 120 million followers or something? Or thousand? What is it? 1,000 million? I don't know what it is anymore.
1,000. I know, it's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, strange to me still that there's that many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just shows you how many people are grieving, and how how lonely it does feel in grief.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry for all your loss,
Thank
and
you.
I can totally understand that feeling. I divorced many, many years ago, but over COVID, I lost both my parents, and it was, yeah, it was pretty devastating. And what's interesting is I have a lot of great girlfriends. And of course, they reached out, and actually, many of them are in the death industry, and they beautifully helped me through the process. But then, after it was over, the few that came forward and said, how can we support you? And I simply said, can you just check on me? Just call me up. Maybe we can go out for coffee. Just check on me regularly.
Yeah.
And nobody did. Everyone went silent. And these are still really good girlfriends. But I have found, and this happened to me during, of course, my divorce too, which is another form of grief, period. Same thing. I was cut off, isolated, crickets, and nobody wants to address or hear your grief, witness your pain. And to me, as I've done more of my work and worked with women throughout all the years, I found that yeah, it brings up so much grief in other people when they're not really grieving. It reminds them that they've got grief to deal with too. And we are in this culture where being sad is not allowed. Like you can have mental health days, you can't have grief days.
Yeah.
You can't have like crazy sad days off. And I was talking to this other group that I work with, this trauma group. I'm doing this trauma informed therapy, and what really comes to light is how in our culture, women are allowed to cry and express their emotions with crying, but not anger. We're not allowed to be angry, and men are allowed to be angry but not cry. And I found that interesting. It is such a dichotomy, not just an imbalance, but an injustice in how we should all be allowed to express all of our feelings, and it should be accepted. And but again, it just what it does, it brings up other people's traumas, I find. What have you found in your journey of grief?
I think you're so right. I feel like we don't talk about secondary losses very much either. And that's something I found through the end of my marriage as well, is I I knew I was losing him, but I didn't realize I was going to lose a whole lot of our mutual friends or, you know, his family that had been in my life for 28 years. You know, it suddenly shifts. Every relationship in your life changes through these losses. Um, and yeah, it can be, it's just an extra hurt in many ways, you know. And I know what you're saying about, you know, being there for friends. I find it hard too. I mean, you know, I talk about it all the time about how to support friends in grief, how to support, and I do my best, and I think we all do, but sometimes we do let people down without even realizing it. I think it's a really difficult journey to stay on with people as well, because everyone feels the initial sadness for that person, and but we're such a fast moving society that, you know, 3 weeks down the track people have moved on from your loss, but you're left with that loss, and it's so much greater than 3 weeks, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
it's forever, and it's about I think for me, I got to a point where I realized I can't depend on anyone else to get me through this. I have to get through it on my own. And, you know, I mean, that's part of how the Grief Project started, right? So yeah, it's so complicated. And as, yeah, as a society, we don't talk about it enough. Um, we don't handle it very well at all, I think, personally.
Yeah. Yeah. So since you started this project, you've continued to teach grief, and now you're a grief, what would you call yourself? You're a grief counselor, a grief
Grief educator.
educator.
Yeah. So yeah, it all shifted there too, because I mean, I'm an illustrator. I have my own business in illustrating, and it's all children's products. It's all completely different to grief. It's all about building self-esteem and positive affirmations and building children up. And then yeah, then I followed David Kessler for a long time on Instagram, and saw that he was running a course, his first grief educator course, and I just love his energy and the way he teaches and talks about grief. It's very on par to me. It's very gentle and no time limits, and so yeah, signed up for his course, and yeah, that changed everything as well, because then I just fell in love with it and feel like it's, yeah, just something really calling me. Yeah. So I'm a grief educator. Yes. Yeah, even the page has shifted a lot since then, because it was really all about my pain and my grief and my feelings. And now it has become more of I guess, evened out. But yeah, there's a lot more education in there as well for people who are grieving, but also people who are wanting to support others who are grieving and just don't know where to start. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that on some of your posts. I love the one that I just saw recently. What the things to say to a person who's grieving, which is all perfect, you know,
Yeah.
because we just say, oh, okay, that's really sorry for your loss, and okay, bye. You know, don't want to talk to you
Try
anymore.
and cheer people out of it, and, you know, give all the placards of, you know, like, oh, she wouldn't want you to be sad. And I copped a lot of that from very well-meaning people. But it's so painful when you know, especially in early grief, when you really are still in denial, you're still feeling like, how can this be happening? And you've got someone saying to you, you know, oh, she wouldn't want you to be sad, she's in a better place. And it's just, yeah, it's just not helpful to people who are grieving at all. That kind of toxic positivity, yeah, vibes. Yeah, and sit with someone and let them be sad. I know it's hard for us to sit in that and be vulnerable with someone, and especially we just want to fix everything as humans, right? Everything needs to be fixed, but you just cannot fix grief. Nothing fixes it. So just letting people talk is, or not talk, if they just want to sit there in silence and you just sit beside them, that's enough. But people feel like they have to somehow solve the issue. Yeah.
That's so true. So true. And then they quickly, if it doesn't work, ignore all the other
Yeah.
signs of your grief and don't want to acknowledge it. And
Yeah.
I also followed David Kessler and was part of his group for quite a while. And I found that really helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like that as well. I'm a fixer myself, and we all want to fix ourselves, and we're all trying to figure it out, especially now. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But my go-to was, what resources are out there to help me? Where can I get help? I found when it came to counseling, there wasn't anybody who could really counsel me on how I was feeling, because they didn't experience it. So they had no idea. Even though I went to my therapist, it was sort of helpful, but not really. And I noticed that you mentioned in one of your posts about the 5 stages of grief. And that's fascinating, because I always felt, and I knew about, uh, what's her name?
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, yes. I read her book years ago and have kind of used it to, in a way, to kind of help people understand what stage of grief that they're in, even though they might not, it's like divorce was my thing. So it was a loss, it was a grief.
Yeah.
But that was it. It just helps you define where you're at. It's not the solution to coming out of grief.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was what you said in your post, that it was really meant to help people as they were exiting.
Yes. Yes.
Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, so I thought before I had any loss, I knew of the 5 stages of grief, and I thought that it was just you go through that, then you go through that, then that, and you're done. And you come out the other side and you're all fixed again, and you never have another sad day kind of thing, which is so bizarre to me now, but that's what I thought the 5 stages of grief were. Um and it was through David that I learned that, in fact, because he wrote a book with her as well. I'm not sure if you've read that one, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And came up with the 6th stage of grief, which is honoring them. And yes, but he told us that her initial work was with patients that were terminally ill, and her studying of the stages they went through, which makes a lot of sense, but then it does still work with grief, you're right. And we need to re-educate people to understand that it's not linear. You don't go boom, 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 boom. You may go to anger and sadness 80 times before you move on to denial or bargaining or whatever, or acceptance. And that's the thing. But she was such a big promoter of that grief was different for everyone. So it's really sad that her words and her meaning has sort of been so twisted, because she really got slammed there, or she still does a lot, for people still thinking that that's what her work was. So yeah, it's interesting.
Thank you for that interpretation. I understood early on, as I was working with clients, that they were having all of it all at once. Sometimes it was like, I'm having in one day all of these 5 stages, and I don't know what to do with myself. But of course, it was just it was bringing forth an awareness for the grief that they were going through, and then we could start working on helping them. But it is very important for people to understand that the 5 stages are not a linear process. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You you can go through all of those stages in one day, you know, on a bad grief day. It's, yeah, it's,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think I did that just today. Because it never ends. You have a couple of days and then, oh my gosh. And then you have, oh, maybe a day and then 3 days are crappy. It's like, it's really a bit of a roller coaster, and it still is.
it is. It's really, and I would find, especially in early, you know, before I knew a lot about my grief, because I think that's another thing is we, you know, we land in grief and we have, if we haven't experienced it before, we don't know what is happening. I mean, I could not sleep. I could not eat. My hair was falling out. I was just like, what is happening to me? Why am I not sleeping? Why, you know, all these things. And it's just, it takes a while for you to understand your own grief. So in that, I felt like every time I started to think, every time I would think, oh, I'm doing good, it would just hit me again. You know, that within 24 hours, I would just, a song would come on the radio, or I'd see a photo of my mom or something that would just bring me down. And it was like the universe was going, no, you're not okay. And I got to a point where I was like, every time I thought, oh, I'm doing good, I'd be like, oh, okay, here we go. We're going to slide down that roller coaster again. Yeah. And even now, I mean, my mum's been gone 7 years now. And yeah, there's just moments, or there's just times that it hits you again where you just think, oh, you know, just that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I also like this, going through my parents' grief really made me reflect on my in-laws, my ex-in-laws that passed away quite a few years ago, and and reflect on how we dealt with it as a family. And I got to tell you, we didn't deal with it at all. We just quickly did all the things we needed to do to have the funeral, you know, this, and this, and um, and then the family just dispersed and they went on with their lives.
Yeah.
And we never, nobody came together. And this is my in-laws family, my ex's family. Nobody came together and just really sat in the grief together, you know, and told stories and just really helped each other through it. They just went off and suffered in their own corners. And I did the same thing because I was part of the let's get this all done kind of, you know, teamwork, let's get it done. And then we did it again with my ex-father-in-law. And this was just when I was separating too. So it was even like, oh my God, the world is falling apart. And having my parents pass recently really brought me back to that. So I had like this double dose of grief, because then I was like, oh my God, I have no parents anywhere.
Yeah.
So what can you say about that and dealing with past grief as well, and how it can compound and
Yeah, it's a lot. It's really interesting how that happens too. I know what you mean. I, yeah, I think, I don't know what to say actually. It's,
yeah.
when you do have compounding grief like that, and it kind of hits and hits, and, or cumulative grief, um, I know it's important to kind of try and give each, I don't want to say person, but each loss its time, you know? So, because some days you just don't even know what you're feeling. But if you can pinpoint and go, okay, like there are days where I just think about our dog, you know, who was with us for 15 years, and he was just so beautiful. And there are days still where I just go, oh, gee, I miss him, you know? And if you can sort of compartmentalize them, I guess, and break them down, rather, because otherwise it can be so overwhelming and it can just feel like the weight of the world is so heavy. So, I mean, for me, I do a lot of writing through my grief. I find that really helpful for me. It shifts things and moves things and tells me what I'm feeling, because often I don't know what I'm feeling until I'm actually writing it. Um, but yeah, the compounded grief is intense, and I think it also stops and makes us look at how we, like you say, how we handle things, how we've handled things previously. And same, I look back at my father-in-law as well, and I feel like I was so unaware of the grief afterwards. But saying that, they're Maori, Indigenous New Zealanders, and they do death in such an amazing way. I mean, the body is with the family for a start, and it's just this beautiful. They have these beautiful ceremonies, and I'm not sure if obviously every family is different, but things like a talking stick, where at night they would pass the stick around and everyone would tell a story, and
I love
that's
that.
yeah, so many beautiful little things that, to me, when I look at the way they do loss and grief, I just think they cover everything. And I feel like when they finally step into the funeral, people are more prepared, and they've had time with that person. They've had time to say their goodbyes. It's not a 10-minute viewing in a cold old, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to see culturally how people handle things too. And us Westerners just, yeah, it's so sterile. It leaves people, they haven't even begun to process, and they're left on their own again. It's like once the funeral's over, everyone disperses and goes back to their life. So, yeah.
I really love that. The traditional peoples, even the Aboriginal people here in Canada, they have such beautiful community ceremonies and traditions.
Yes.
And, as you were saying that, I remember my ex-mother-in-law's funeral. Now, this was the first mother in the community to go. And it was more my ex's community, not really mine. And there was an old friend of hers who, when she went up to her coffin, just broke down and started weeping and wailing, and everyone shushed her. They didn't allow her to just grieve,
Yeah.
and they just quickly whisked her away to
Yeah.
suffer and in private, away from everybody. And that's tragic. I thought that was really tragic that they did that, because yeah, what else are you going to do when you see the dead person who you love there? Like there's going to be tears.
Yeah, and it really shows how uncomfortable we are with people's pain, right? That we can't just be in that and hold space for it. We have to just shut it down because we don't want to upset anyone or cause a scene. Yeah. Whereas the
Yeah.
Maoris, the women do the wailing as they, bring the coffin out and stuff, and it's incredible. It's so moving. And yeah, I mean, there's a
Like,
lot of that. There's a lot that I don't know. You know,
yeah, like
raised.
my heart is just like opening up to that, um, to that, the idea of women wailing. Like, it's so powerful, and how much we need it here. Oh my God, look, Lou. I'm breaking down. It's been a day.
No, it's
It's
so
been a day. I find that before interviews, like, I'm already in the interview all day. I'm thinking about all day. I was thinking about grief, so I'm very open to grief
yeah,
right now.
that's all good. Cry as much as you want. Yeah.
Thank you. So now, how do you talk to people who are grieving? Like, what are some of the tools you can give to people who are presently grieving and really don't have community and who are really suffering on their own? What can we say to those people?
I mean, I obviously it's different for everyone. Grief is different for everyone. And I think a big part of it is being vulnerable with someone and saying, I'm not 100% what you need right now, but I want to be here for you. I had a loss. We lost, it's hard to explain, but a young girl, Lucy, she was one of my best friend's daughters, and she was one of my daughter's best friends. So she passed really suddenly, and that was the first time that I really stopped and looked at how we support people in grief. And because all I wanted to do is fix it for them, for my beautiful friends, and for the biggest loss that they will probably ever have. And at first I found that I was just sending her messages every morning and saying, I love you, and I'm thinking of you, and I'm trying to think of things that can help. And then I sent her a message one day and said, if I'm annoying you, just tell me, like, I don't know what you need right now. I don't know what to do. And she said to me, let's just go for a walk. And it sort of became a thing for us that I'd just take a coffee over to her. I'd pick her up. We'd go down to the beach and we'd just walk for a couple of hours. And sometimes we'd say nothing. And sometimes she would pour her heart out. And sometimes we'd tell funny stories about Lucy. And I think I learned a lot about supporting someone else in grief through that. And for me, I just try to always remember the special days for her, particularly Mother's Day. I always message her first thing on Mother's Day. And now I'm getting emotional. Just to say to her, I know today is a really hard day for you, and I think you're an amazing mother, and I'm thinking of you. If I ever come across an old photo of Lucy that I think she may not have seen, or even if she has seen it, I'll send it to her. I think it's important to let people know that they're not forgotten. I know it's a real fear for many people that their person will just be forgotten, because it can feel like that when everyone goes back to their lives. You just feel like no one really cares. Like that had no impact on them. And I think it's not what you say, it's more about just being there for them, and whatever that means for your friendship. For some people it's cooking for people, for others it's cleaning their hat, coming over and taking their children out for the day and saying, you get a day on your own. And for others, sometimes it is literally just sitting next to them and letting them and witnessing their grief. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I think people need to have their grief witnessed. And yeah, I mean, there's so many things you can do, and so many things that some people won't even like. I mean, what comforts me may not comfort you. But yeah, I think it's being vulnerable and saying to someone, if you don't know what to say, I just don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah, just admitting that, none of these phrases, even though this is all we have, is like sincere condolences and I'm sorry for your loss. And, they're fine, but if you're really close to that person, that's just not enough. It really is. I really love that, taking a coffee over to a friend and just going for a walk, or just, what do you need? I've done that for other friends for sure.
Yeah.
I send over a delivery of food for her family for the day, because they were in shock over the loss. Yeah.
My dearest friends, she didn't do it straight away, but it was so beautiful. It was like probably a month after my mum passed, and she just turned up at my house one night and she just bought this big box of organic food and just beautiful teas and things just to build me up again. And I was so depleted at that point. I wasn't eating properly, and it was such a beautiful thought. I just was like, it just meant so much to me. And it wasn't in the craziness of when everyone was around. She let it all sit for a moment and then was there, and it's something I'll never forget. It was really special, really thoughtful.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What are some of the other, pardon me, the other stories? What are some of the other stories that you can share with us of healing and loss and how we can support people and support ourselves like that. We were talking more about supporting people, like how do we support ourselves, like how do we really take the time and integrate it. And yeah, I mean, I have a lot of experience around not supporting myself, but it took a while.
Yeah, I think I think in times of grief, we need to really go back to basics with ourselves and um, really tune into our what is going on with us emotionally. I know that's really hard for a lot of people if they are not generally good at sharing their emotions. But I think really simple things like going to bed early, like that was for me probably a real saving grace because I was really struggling to sleep. But I would at 7:30 at night, I would just be like a zombie, and so I would take myself to bed and I'd write every night. I would pretty much just cry and write what I was feeling and get some sleep. I would be up at 2 o'clock in the morning then for the rest of the night. But um, things like that, hot showers, long showers, like sit on the ground and find the space that finding the space where you can let it out as well, because we don't always have that, especially as mothers and if we have husbands, whatever, or in relationships. You know, there's so much going on in everyday moments that I think it's really important to take time for yourself, even if it's 10 minutes a day, even if it's getting up half an hour earlier than your children to just have a cup of tea and write or do a meditation. Or it's just like we need to be so gentle with ourselves. And I see so many people um, have a loss and within 2 weeks they're just back into their lives like full bore. And I just it amazes me, but it also makes me sad because I just go, we don't give ourselves the time and space to just be in it. We just so, you know, we're so trained to push through rather than just sit in it and be in it. And once we can do that, the grief waves kind of pass a little easier. They don't feel as intense, but when you're fighting it, it's like this, it's like the grief comes crashing into you. And you know, and it's so, it felt, for me, it felt so much more dramatic. And once I started to accept that this was going to keep happening, I wasn't just going to wake up tomorrow and it's all done. As soon as I accepted that this grief is now a part of me and I'm going to always experience it, I can handle it. You know, when it does come at me, I can be in it, I can let it out, and then I can move on and move on with my day. Yeah.
I love that. That's so powerful, that message of being kind to yourself and
Yeah.
being gentle with yourself, because we certainly don't do that. And we've been taught not to do that. In fact, it's virtuous not to be gentle with yourself in our culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, just beat yourself up some more, push through, no pain, no gain.
Yeah, and we're really gaslighting ourselves in our grief too, you know. I mean, I went through a phase where I was just, well, many times, where I was like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I look around and everyone else moves on, but I can't move on? What is wrong with me? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just processing slower or differently. Um, and, you know, it's also depends on the relationship. I mean, I had a really complicated relationship with my mum and I love her to death, but it wasn't always easy between us. So I had a lot of regret as well after she passed. I felt like I'd wasted a lot of years just being angry and her being angry at me. And so that can complicate things as well. And we just need to find forgiveness for ourselves. We need to be so much kinder to ourselves. And a girlfriend said it to me one day. She said, I was kind of beating myself up about where I was at. And she said to me, Lou, you would never, ever say this to a friend. Why are you saying it to yourself? You know, and that really shifted something for me. It really stopped me in my tracks when I would go there. And I just think, no, she's so right. Like I would never treat a friend this way. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. That is so important to know and to say it out loud, that when we speak to ourselves in such a harsh way, like just beating ourselves up. And I too, like you, like who hasn't had a complicated relationship with her mother? Please let me know. I want to hear your story. But yeah, I did the same thing, like, and I think we're all grieving, even if we have mothers that are alive. On some level, we're grieving the loss of the childhood we thought we were gonna have, or the mother that we thought we were gonna have, and this is what brought me into trauma work, because this is all part of that process of working through our traumas. And, this idea that we are not just grieving the loss of our mothers, our fathers, or whatever the relationships, but the loss of the life we thought we were going to have, the
Yes.
loss of the relationship we thought we were going to have. And
Yes.
now there's no chance to make it right on some level, right? It's all gone. And so yeah, like it's so complex. Grief is so complex, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
Mm,
And no two losses are the same. Even, I mean, as you would know, I'm sure with your mother and your father, I'm very lucky I've still got my dad. But yeah, I imagine those two losses are completely different too, because they're such different relationships. Yeah, that
yes.
does,
Oh my gosh. Yes.
yeah.
So different.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So yeah, the message is just really being gentle, I think. Do you find that that's the most important message that we can give anybody who is grieving?
I think so. I think, yeah, be real. Yes, be really kind to yourself, be gentle, take, be selfish, even, I think it's one time that you you just need to do what you need to do. I mean, I did feel like I sort of failed as a mother for a while there, because I just
Mm,
had nothing left in me. I stopped cooking. I felt like I stopped cleaning. I just didn't care. I just would look at things and think, I don't care. It all just, nothing made sense to me anymore. Um, and then you got to work through that guilt of, oh, did I let them down through that period? And but yeah, we need to forgive ourselves. We're human too, right?
yeah.
Which is
Yes.
that we often
Oh,
forget. We try and
yeah, absolutely.
I'm there for everyone else. I think, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's very important. We're human and we deserve to have that time to
Yeah.
grieve, and that time. Yeah, it's taken me a long time, but like you, um I am now really good with giving myself permission to like check out, because if
Yeah.
I'm having a bad day, there's a lot going on. And that means I need to really take care of myself. And it took me years to start putting myself first,
Yeah.
since everybody else was first. And that's also a very important thing. This goes for men and women. Like, it's not just the women, although, we talk about women who they certainly do a lot. Men also have been denied their right to grieve and be vulnerable. And
Absolutely.
it's so, I mean, and because of that, that's why we're in the world that we're in. All the violence and all the trauma that we keep repeating culturally, and with the wars and with everything, we haven't allowed men to be vulnerable. And it's really tragic, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes me so sad. I don't know how they do it, to be honest. I mean, at least we have the permission to be able to just let it out whenever. I feel like I can't imagine what it must be like for men, where they do feel completely shut down, that they have to just never show any emotion. And no wonder it comes out in rage, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's going to come out. You
Yeah.
can't you, right? You can't shove it down forever. It won't go away. It will come out one way or another.
Yeah. And if it doesn't come out in emotion, it comes out in illness. Your body ends up diseased. Yeah.
Yeah. exactly. I remember years ago, a sort of an acquaintance girlfriend who I'd known for many years. She was dying of cancer, and I didn't know this because I hadn't been in touch with her, but I bumped into her husband during like a function, and he let me know that his wife Nicola was dying of cancer, and I was like in shock, and I'm like, oh my god, are you, how can I get in touch with her? Is she able to have visitors? Like, what's the scenario? And um, I ended up sending her a big box of all kinds of things because she was really isolating herself anyways, but that actually prompted her to connect with me, which was lovely. But I did what I always do and always did with this particular gentleman, and I grabbed him and I hugged him and I gave him a big hug, and he had the hardest armor on, like energetic armor. It was like hugging a rock. Like there was nothing gonna permeate, and he didn't want to feel it. And of course, it wasn't an appropriate time to reveal any kind, but I could really feel, oh my God, that
Yeah.
armor that he was holding to keep it all together. And it was just, oh, that gave me so much pain just to know that he had to do that
Mm.
because his wife was dying and he had a company to run and he had a daughter to take care of. And I was like, if you need anything, just reach out. I'm here for you, even though we don't talk much. But, of course, he didn't take up on that. But yeah,
It is heartbreaking. It is, yeah.
I wish that we could allow men to grieve and be vulnerable, because that would help everybody. It would help our whole world. Imagine, right? Could you imagine?
I know, it would be incredible. Yeah, I know. And there's so many, it's so generational too, isn't it? There's so much there that I don't even know how yeah, we need our
No,
men to do the work to really step up and dive into it.
yeah,
Which, some are, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Beautiful to see when you do see it. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. It is slow coming, but it is happening, which is lovely.
Yeah.
So, Lou, what else are you doing out in Australia with this beautiful grief project?
Well, we are very excited because I've been talking about running retreats for quite a while now, and we have finally booked our first one, which is going to be on August the 3rd and 4th. And August the 3rd is actually my mother's birthday, so it feels
Oh,
perfect.
mm,
And it's me and my sister. So my sister is a part of the Grief Project too. She's much more behind the scenes and she doesn't like her face out there. Like, so yeah, we look, it's all very early stages, but there'll be lots more coming about it soon. We're just kind of piecing it together, and it will be held in Bendigo in a beautiful venue that a friend of mine owns, and it's just gorgeous.
mm.
It actually, the first time I went there, it reminded me of my mum, just her style, and yeah. So we're very excited to like hold that, especially being our mum's birthday. It feels just like it's meant to be, and it'll be like a beautiful space for people to just kind of gather. We'll be doing some beautiful little projects and things, some art therapy and journaling and meditating and just talking about grief and loss, and educating a little bit too, because I feel like a lot of people, even, I mean, I know even for me, when I started David's course, I realized how much I didn't even understand about grief. I was just in it and just didn't really get what was happening. So yeah, very excited about that. It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Looks like I'm going to have to travel to Australia in August.
Yeah, do it. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I would love to come. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see
You never
what
know.
happens.
Get
But in
out
the
there.
meantime, if anybody wanted further information from you, can they just connect with you on your website or
Yeah,
Instagram?
Yep, they can message us on Instagram or email us. Our email is connected to our Instagram if you want to email direct to the Grief Project. And yeah, we'll go from there. But we'll have some announcements very soon about what it will all be about as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. And so for anyone who's viewing this, we're going to have more information in the notes, in the show notes below. So you can connect directly with Lou. And if you're in Australia or anywhere in that part of the world where you like to travel, then I highly recommend that you take this time for yourself and allow yourself to have these 2 days. It's only 2 days, but I'm sure that if you go deep into the grief, wow, you'll be able to just push through so much, giving yourself that permission to go deep for 2 days.
Yeah.
I love that idea. There aren't enough of those happening in our neck of the woods here in North America, that's for sure.
Not enough happening here either. And I just think it's so important, like you say, to take that time to gift yourself that time to really just be able to focus on that for one weekend. It's not much time, but it's something that, yeah, could be really transformative for people who are, feeling really isolated as well. To be in a group situation, I know it's not for everyone, but whenever I've done group work like that, I go into it going, oh, really like, oh, I don't want to be a part of this. It feels uncomfortable, but it's always amazing. And connecting with other people that are going through similar to you is like what it's all about, right?
Yeah. I personally love group work
Yeah.
because, we are, especially now, I mean, before we had a loneliness epidemic, but now post the pandemic, we are so lonely now because we're self-isolating still. We're still in the trauma of keeping ourselves enclosed, and it just adds to the pain and the suffering that we're experiencing individually. So if we could be with people who are in the same position as us and can really allow us to be our true selves, it is a beautiful experience, truly beautiful and healing, so healing. As you said, just the witnessing of grief just allows so much permission for you to just let it out and help it run through your system and dissipate. And yeah,
For sure. Yeah. And I
nice.
mean, help each other heal, right? I mean, even the last couple of years, since my marriage broke down, just reconnecting with some old friends, and we've been through similar experiences. And I really noticed, like, just sharing your story with another person who, one, hears it and then shares their story back. It's like we're healing each other in those moments. It's such a beautiful thing. So I'm hoping that these retreats will, really, be really helpful for people who are feeling alone. And you're right, it's amazing how we've come out of COVID. I really thought we'd come out a lot more connected, because I felt like people stopped and looked inward, but I feel like we've come out in a very ugly way, to be honest. I feel like there's
All over the world.
yeah,
It's all over the world. Yeah. I just came back from London, Bristol, and I was in Oslo, Norway, and it's the same everywhere. Everybody's suffering everywhere. Yeah. So,
need this more than ever.
yeah, allowing grief is so important. And I just want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for having this beautiful platform on Instagram that allowed us to connect and spread the word on the importance of allowing yourself to grieve. I love that. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Diana. I felt very honored when you reached out to me. So yeah, it's beautiful to connect, and I love it. I love talking to people from all over the world. It's so cool. We're very lucky since now, aren't we? I mean, yeah. So it's been lovely to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode on grief and grieving and the Grief Project with Pennisi. I loved our conversation. It was very relaxed and it gave me more insight into the gentleness that you have to offer yourself when you're grieving. I know that grieving has been my friend for a couple of years now. I'm actually, since my mom passed to my dad, for 2 to 4 years. Yeah. And I know that grief requires patience and you can't force grief. So, what are you grieving right now? Don't be afraid to share. And of course, like this episode. And if you like what I'm doing here on the exit plan, please subscribe, share it with your family, your friends. The more knowledge we have around this process of exiting this life, the easier we'll be able to accept what we need to do at the end and live a life that's more full. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.